Yeah, I have been bodybuilding for like 10 years, and I was always against CrossFitting because I was like, man, they just get injured all the time. Like, I've
This
never gotten like seriously injured bodybuilding.
this is my first big one. So I was deadlifting. We were doing sets of 5. I was at 385, and I was showing off because my buddy, whom I'm very competitive with, he did them and he dropped between each rep, which is totally kosher. And I thought I'm going to show him up, and so I decided to descend with the barbell each time. And fourth time on the way down, my hips caved and I slightly injured a disc in my back.
Ooh.
So it could have been so much worse. Like I immediately, as it was failing, I dropped, and so that saved me from really getting it. And so, like I did, like my deadlift max around 450, and today I was at 115 deadlifts, just
Damn.
practicing rebuilding the muscle.
Yeah, I at this point in my like exercising fitness journey, I I don't know, I have my like phases where I want to bulk up and like just try to gain weight. But more often than not, I just find myself just maintaining
Yeah.
and just trying to stay like overall healthy.
How old are you?
29.
Okay. So I'm 43, and one of the things that you tend to encounter as you get old is your potential to
Yeah.
put on muscle mass starts to drop as you get older, right? And then somewhere in your 50s, you stop being able to put on muscle mass. And then from there on out is just a slow decline of muscle mass. And it all goes badly. Once you have so little muscle mass, you start falling and breaking things. It's like generally when someone falls, like say if you fall and break a hip and you're over the age of 60, it's like, gosh, with 50% chance you'll be dead in the next 5 years. Because at that point now,
Very.
because now you're like have to be in a chair, you have to be in a bed, and so it accelerates the muscle
Yeah.
loss, and then all of a sudden your body just doesn't have enough to hold it together. And so the more muscle mass you have going into that ending phase, the longer you will be capable.
Yeah. My goal for muscle mass is because I'm short and I have a small frame, but I think I could get up to like a good like 170.
Yeah, that'd be a good number for you.
But I like in high school, I was uh like I literally remember being like 100 pounds, and now I'm 150, and I've like maintained 150 for like a couple years now.
Nice.
But yeah, I still like want to have that lean, like I don't want to like get I mean, I guess you have to take steroids to get that big, but like people with the what's it called, like
That's just really
steroid
ripped.
gut.
Yeah, yeah. Six
Steroid
pack,
gut, where
whatever.
it's like a gut but it's like abs poking out.
Yep, yep.
um but yeah, man, my podcast, welcome.
Thank you.
So I want to start by reading your introduction. You ready?
Let's do it.
Today we have a Ph.D. graduate in chemistry from Cornell University who has transitioned from a life in academics to entrepreneurship and now life coaching. He also went on to build 3 different successful businesses with his wife, and he has a unique talent for translating extremely complex ideas to something simple, actionable, and practical, all while staying fun and lighthearted. Welcome, Michael Jaquith, everyone.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, man. My first question is, I ask every guest pretty much the same question. Who really is Michael Jaquith, and what got you into like what you do today? Like, why are you so passionate about what you do today?
That's a great question, and that's obviously a very deep question. But with your permission, I'll kind of start in the beginning and kind of set the stage
Yeah.
for how I came here. So I grew up
Yeah.
in northern Michigan in a very poor, a very, very broken, and in fact, relatively abusive family. There were broken bones, there were bruises, had to be hid from the nurses. There was lots of yelling. My dad had lots of affairs, and it culminated with sexual abuse, and he went to jail for 10 years. And so from sixth grade on, I didn't have a dad. And so coming out of that particular not great start, I was not a very happy young man. I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of shame. And going forth in the world, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder the size of, a mountain, right? And so I hit college and I chased what I call the church of hedonism, which is find whatever pleasure you can, live it now, because you never know when you get another pleasure. I drank like a fish. I could put an entire bottle of vodka down in one night. I wouldn't get up the next morning super happy, but I could do it. And at the time, that seemed like an accomplishment. I chased the ladies. I wasn't very good at it. So then I sort of discovered internet ladies are a whole lot easier to catch. And so went down that path pretty hard and really ran that lifestyle, as hard as I could, and was miserable. At the end of the day, I was miserable. I woke up just feeling horrible, unfulfilled, unsatisfied. And after more than a decade, because remember, I'm slow. It takes me sometimes a little time to catch on to what's going on. After more than a decade of it, I said, screw this. This isn't working. I need something else. And that was the start of becoming who that I am today.
What, like, did you have a moment? Like, what was that moment? Like, did you have a rock bottom? Because,
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
think
you have a PhD, so you had to have been doing something, right, to get that or were you pursuing that while you were pursuing the hedonistic path?
Oh, for sure, I was chasing both. And, I by the grace of God, I'm a very blessed man. Like, I've got a lot of intellect. And I've also had a really great work ethic. When you grow up poor and you realize that you get nothing in life other than what you're going to earn, then you learn to work hard. And so I busted my butt. I put in a lot of hours. I worked jobs while going through college. I actually came out with my PhD with no debt. Like, I was that driven to be like, I am going to change my family tree. And simultaneously, I also have a liver that ought to be win a gold medal for being able to process alcohol. I get that from my father's side of the family. My two great uncles actually were Navy SEALs, and when they were serving in Vietnam, they actually started their own brothel. And then the joke was they almost ran themselves out of business by how much they drank. And it's just just genetics are a funny thing, right? And so I don't know. There's a singular moment I hit rock bottom. I'd say it was like things kept getting worse, and I knew the truth probably a year before I was willing to admit it to myself. Like, where I'm like, this just isn't going to work. It's just not going to work. I got to do something different. And so after eventually I just started looking around and even then, I'm a man of faith. And so I'm going to share a little bit about my own faith story here because the faith plays a big role. When I was in high school, I met a young man, same age as me, more or less, and we shared two great loves. We love the outdoors and we love to argue. I still love to argue. I still love the outdoors. I live in Idaho. It's so beautiful. And for 12 years, we argued about theology. And in the 12th year of this argument, this great grand argument, he says to me, Michael, I noticed you're not really arguing anymore. Now you're just asking questions to learn more. And I said to him, that's ridiculous, Paul. I would never do that. I don't know what you're talking about. And he just smirked and said, okay, sure, whatever. And it was about 6 months after that I really finally felt called to convert and become Christian. And at the time, I really thought, oh, cool, this will solve my problems, right? I tried the Church of Hedonism. That didn't work. I'll just shove in the Church of Christianity. Problem solved. Check in the box. Move on, right? And no, that was still just the beginning of the journey. But to really answer your question, I think a lot of us, when we're hurting really, really deeply, when there's some deep, powerful wounds, and, as a young man, combining the fatherhood wound, a rejection by the father, combining really by my mother as well. Like, she went into a pretty serious alcoholic phase after that. And so there was some real disconnect and some, rejections there, where it's almost like a role reversal where I had to be the parent for a little while. And combining that with just this tremendous amount of shame, we can know a truth up here and be unwilling to engage it down here in the core of who we are. And so I lived for a long time in that state.
Man, you're breaking up a little bit, but I could still hear you. So now you practice faith, you practice Christianity, right?
Yeah.
What made you, I guess, what made you stop arguing and start deciding to just ask questions and be open to that?
You know, speaking just for a second philosophically, there are three things in the world that cut through any argument and any resistance: the good, the true, and the beautiful. Today, truth is compromised. We have all sorts of arguments about truth. Good is relativized. What is good anymore? But beauty can still cut through. I live in Idaho, as I mentioned. Out my window right there is a mountain, and at the top of the mountain, it's just this beautiful. There's still snow on it. There's trees that rise to rise. In fact, right now at this moment, there's shadow on the tip of the mountain, but the sunlight coming down. It's this beautiful effect that really is striking to look at. I'm not going to tilt the camera because I might not get back to the right spot. But the beauty can cut through, and I think when our heart is ready, so can the good and the true. And as I went through my journey, I knew there had to be something more. You know, there's one of the analogies that's oftentimes made for faith, and this appeals to me as a scientist. When we look at a creature, say like a dog, right? Well, a dog has some basic drives. It wants to eat. And so clearly there must be something in the world for food. It wants to drink water, so clearly there must be water in the world. It wants to chase things. We had border collies. They were like the most craziest chasers of all time. Have you ever seen border collie crazy eyes? Like, it's so much fun. They're like, and they just stare at you to chase something, right? And so it makes sense. There's something in the world to chase. And that makes sense as we understand the dog with a prey drive. But as a human, there's something in me that yearned for something bigger beyond myself. There's something in me that wanted a meaning that transcended the suffering I'd gone through, that transcended the hopeless pain and ridiculousness of, well, this is my list of horrible things that's happened in my life that I have every reason, according to the world, to be pissed off about, but I want something bigger than that. And so as I began that search, what that led me to is, well, if I'm just made to find something bigger, then what if there's something bigger out there? And what could that be? And when I took those questions seriously, really, really seriously, you start to investigate the claims of the world. Like, there's a lot of different ways to explore faith, explore religion. And I'm not saying there's any one right way, but my way was primarily through truth. And the truth of saying, look, I investigate a lot of religions. There's something unique about Christianity. There's been a lot of men throughout history who have claimed to be God. Quite a few women too, but particularly men have claimed to be God throughout history. A lot of them, right? Without exception, they've all died. Even Jesus, he died. What makes Jesus' story unique is he came back. So there's something a little bit different there in that story, right? Something that deserves a little bit more like, hey, that's kind of cool. What's going on there? And as I explored that and said, wow, there are some different claims here, and to really look for the proof and the fruit that the church has brought into the world. Like, if you really go back 2,000 years ago and look at the cultural mores of the time, it makes our current cultural social struggles look like nothing. I mean, slavery was still like totally fine. Women weren't citizens. The man of the household, like, he would just literally decide which babies lived and which babies didn't. I don't like this one's nose, toss in the street. You know, I'm sorry, wife, you're not working for me anymore. I'm kicking you out, get a new one. Like, it was just total, it's like exactly what we don't want to have happen today. And the reality is what changed is the advent of Christendom. And I think even most modern atheists will admit that the progress we have came through Christendom. There's a debate about whether or not we still need it, but the progress did come through it. And when I looked at that and I really opened myself up to that, I found something. And I found something real and something solid, something that withstood the test of my intellect.
I hear you, man. I'm sorry, but I have like a bunch of dogs outside my front. You could probably hear them a little bit.
Just a little bit.
It's kind of distracting me. I'm so sorry. But my next question was, like, okay, so you found faith, and that's kind of weird for somebody that's like into science and chemistry, and it's like the first, like, when I think about it, most people are like, oh, like science can explain everything, right? Or the atheists, which I used to claim myself I was an atheist until I started learning more about like quantum physics and like energy and like higher consciousness. So I guess my question is, what like role has faith played for you, and how did you transition from somebody who's like sciencey, you got this chemistry degree, to believing, like what was that proof for you to really believe in faith, and who is God to you?
Those are great questions. They're big ones, but let me see what I can do to take a swing at them. So first off, I love that you brought up quantum mechanics. There's very few people in the world who really actually understand quantum mechanics. And the reason why is it just is mind-blowingly crazy. Like as you really start to get into it and you understand the nature of the claims and what the mathematics means, it is something so brain-defyingly crazy that like right now I'm holding a pen because I take notes, right? Where's the pen? The pen's in my hand. How do I know that? Because I see it. It's in my hand. What speed is it going? It's not moving at all. I'm holding it still. These are simple things, right? Well, you throw all those kind of concepts out the window, and a ton more when you get into quantum mechanics. And in some ways, that was actually part of my journey into the faith. And my claim to you is I don't believe they're inconsistent at all. And as a human being, we all have yearnings of the heart. What is love? Design a scientific experiment to find and measure love. And yet we watch people kill themselves every day over it. It has to be something. Like there's a reality to it. There's truth to it. And yet science can speak nothing of it. I mean, science makes vague suggestions. And if you look at, I'm going to go super nerdy for just a second, if that's okay. But I think maybe talking to someone who's in the quantum science, you look at the different overlap patterns on different wave configurations within various states of matter, right? Let's just stick with a single electron. And the electron could collapse in a number of different configuration patterns, basically seemingly on random chance. And to me, it's equally as plausible that's not random at all, but a function of consciousness. And the consciousness exerts a force upon the world. We know that to be true. There's definable proof that our consciousness, what we intend as human beings, creates physical manifestations in the world. This can be measured scientifically. And who is to say that one of the major mechanisms of interactions may or may not be probability collapse? And you take all the different probabilities of a hyper-complex state of a brain, and now consciousness may play a role in there. And I say, okay, cool. So there's something there. Maybe. Who knows, right? That's the beauty of the mystery. And as the deeper you go, the more you're like, what a genius potential. In a world where you hold a pen, the pen's stationary, you drop it, it falls to the ground. There's no room for consciousness. There's no room for something beyond what we see right now. But in a world of uncertainty, where probabilities and subparticles don't even exist in some cases, but still have effect, now all of a sudden you have a much more complex system that, to my mind, actually is calling for something bigger. And so whereas you might say it's a conflict, I would argue that it's actually a fulfillment. And when you really read the church in its proper place, and I need to put a huge asterisk there, because throughout time, the abuses by members that claim to be of the church are rampant. And everyone loves to throw up the poor beatings of Galileo and how he claimed the sun was the center of the solar system, and the church authorities like, no, it's the planet. Well, first off, those church authorities stepped way beyond their authority. The church doesn't have anything to say about planetary motion. It's just not a matter of faith. But at the same time, Galileo was a complete and total jerk in how he addressed and dealt with those people. And so he was one of those people who, kind of like me, was very abrasive. And people tended to oppose him just because he was such a jerk. And so we have to look at the story in more complex. But in my own story, as I explored this deeper, I started to discover some of the manifestations of faith that can be tested by science. So, here's some great examples. When Jesus was buried, his body was wrapped in a shroud, right? We still have that shroud. It's preserved. And in fact, you can take that shroud and do scientific analysis on it. And there's some really interesting things pop up. Number one, we shouldn't have it. It should have decayed long ago, but it's perfectly preserved. Like, we know how decay works and how cloth decays and mold and whatnot consumes it. It's still there. On top of that, the patterns imprinted upon the shroud still are active blood in a lot of cases. They portray an image with higher resolution than you could make with a printer. Like there's these components to it. Or another great example, much closer to home here in our shores, is Our Lady of Guadalupe. And that veil, it was a simple peasant's gown, right? And it's made of corn husk fibers. Average lifetime that is 5 years. This was hundreds of years ago. We still have it. And we do not today possess the technology to create an image with the clarity, resolution, and ink types that whatever is used to create this image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And you start diving into these, and you're like, whoa, there's something here, something that steps out of pure Newtonian physics, that steps into the world of mystery. And I actually am going to claim to you the world of quantum mechanics is a world of mystery. It's a world of potential. In fact, that's the primary word used in some of the equations is potential. Now we call it potential energy, fair enough. But the potential exposed is so much more than just a mere wave function. It's an overlapping probability of systems that seem to be affected by consciousness. And you tell me what else you want to call that, but I don't, all of a sudden, this sharp dichotomy between faith and science kind of goes away. Is this making sense, or am I going too nerdy?
Oh man, it seems like you should have gotten like a theology degree or something.
Well,
But
self-taught.
yeah. No, I mean I understand. It's like I always tell people faith is kind of like the technology that we don't see today.
Right.
It's like, okay, you don't see God, you don't believe in God, but you also don't see radio waves, you don't see Wi-Fi, you don't see, like, you don't physically see all of these things, but you believe in it, right? And to me, as somebody that was born and raised Christian, but ultimately like don't claim any like labels on religion anymore, I do believe in God, whatever you want to call it, as some sort of just higher energy, higher being, maybe. I don't think it's a white man in the sky with a robe and long hair and a beard or whatever. But yeah, I follow you, man.
But I think that's a great point there too. Like, let me just dig on that for a second. I think a lot of people who espouse the Christian faith do have an overly simplistic vision of the faith. And it might be slightly more than a white man in the sky with a robe and a beard, but for a lot of them it may not be. And I think it's incumbent upon those who are faith to explore the depths of the faith and to say, what is really going on here? Like, what is the meaning behind this? Are these symbols? Are these reality? Is there something beyond the reality here? And a lot of people are too content.
So what are some of the challenges, I guess, that you face when it comes to modern day religion, and like, do you ever get any backlash for that, just in your day-to-day life, or maybe even in your coaching world? Do you get any backlash for that, like the challenges of having a strong faith and the modern world science, tech, atheist type people?
I think it would be impossible to deny those challenges. I'm a Catholic. There's been a few Catholic things in the news over the last couple of decades. Not very flattering. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there that unfortunately can be very, very challenging. On top of that, I think we live in what's been described as a post-Christian era. And I think that's largely true, where a lot of people look at the good that has come from Christendom and say, great, we'll take the good. We don't need the faith part. Throw that out. You know, it's worth noting that when Nietzsche said those infamous words, God is dead, he didn't say that as a triumph. He wrote that as a mourning of the fate of society. And I think in some ways we're seeing what happens to a society without God play out in front of our eyes right now. But that doesn't change the day-to-day challenges at all. And they're very real. And I go on a lot of podcasts, and I would say that if I were not a person of faith, I would probably spread my message faster and more widely, because it's an issue. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been very badly hurt by humans who, in whatever faith they are, did something malicious and horrible. That is a common story. And it's a story that is real, that I'm not going to take away from anyone. And when we have those deep hurts, it makes it very hard. Same thing as my own story. When we have deep hurts, it's very hard to look at something and see anything good there, because the hurt is real and the hurt's loud. And you know, your nervous system is programmed to respond to negatives somewhere between 5 and 20x more powerfully than it's programmed to respond to positives. Here's a silly example of that. If right now, if I could reach through this monitor, I could steal $5 out of your wallet. Ha! I'm a thief, right? My virtual criminal enterprise begins. Well, you would be hurt by that. In this case, I think I've earned enough good rapport. You probably won't be too badly hurt, but a little bit hurt, right? But what's neat about that is you would be hurt by my stealing $5 from you, about the same amount that you would feel good if I gave you about $100. And just think about that for a second. Like, we're very, very sensitive to the negative. Here's a great example with my kids. So I have 6 kids, so I get to see this a lot. And my kids, if I say to them, kids, we're going to the park today, they go, yay, they're kind of happy. But if later on I say, oh, dad has another work call, I can't go to the park today, oh, they're devastated. It's the same stinking thing. Park, yes. Park, no. Park yes when you didn't think so. Park no when you did think so. The no devastates them. They run around the house moping, oh, life's so horrible. Why do we even live? Throw themselves on the couch, flop down there. And then 5 minutes later on, because they're kids, they forget about it and they go back to playing. But this is the nature of the human being. And so when I go out there and I say, yeah, I'm a Christian and I believe that Jesus Christ was real God and real man, there's a lot of backlash to that. And I think the proper response on my part, not that I've been perfect at it, but the proper response is one of tenderness and understanding. To understand, as John Maxwell, one of my mentors, said, hurting people hurt people. And that's been true in my life. That's true in everyone's life. And so when I see someone who's angry and has a chip on their shoulder the size of a mountain, I pause and I say, I get that. That's been me before. And I've hurt a lot of people in that state. And I hurt a lot of people unfairly. And I think the right amount is tenderness to say, yeah, you've been hurt by someone in the church. You've been hurt by someone who claims something to do with the faith. I get it, man. I get it. God wasn't there for you. You had that moment when the chips were down and your number was called and everything seemed like it was going to go bad. And you did that one desperate prayer that you thought, maybe this one might be the moment that saves it. And nothing happened. And you're like, bleepity bleep bleep all this. I'm done with it. It didn't save me. It doesn't work. It's garbage. What good is it anyways? So I totally get it. Now, I think there's a good response to be made to those people, but it has to be one of tenderness. It has to be one of this one-on-one dialogue that rather than me standing up here and spouting out, God is good, here's the Bible, I'm going to hit you with the Bible in the head until you finally come to realize it. It's not going to win any hearts and minds. But engaging someone directly, we all have a story. My story sucks. Other people's stories suck. I get it. We're there. But we have a story, and we don't have to be bound by that story. I guess I got a little sidetracked there, but does that answer your question?
No, that's good, man. I could tell you're so passionate about it. I love it. What about, like, the thing that came to my mind during that was, what about all of, like, because we spoke about the challenges in the modern world, but what about religion and, like, religious wars of the past? Because I know now, that's why I believe, like, we all have this religion, this label we call God. To me, I just think it's a label. We all believe in a higher power. There's gods, there's certain things we practice, daily practices that are different. But I think it's ultimately, in my mind, like it's all the same. We believe in a higher being, power, God, that we have faith in, that helps guide us through life. So I guess my question is, why do people get so conflicted then? Like, when it comes to religion, it's almost as controversial a topic as, like, politics. When I believe in this, no, I believe in this. It's like, man, there has to be some middle ground somewhere here.
So I love that you brought up politics, because I think that's a great analogy. And we can totally go into past historical religious wars in the same way we can go into past political wars. And here's the short version. Human beings are selfish, arrogant, malicious. Like, we have bad intentions. We are extremely selfish. I want you, I want you, I want you. Oh my goodness, my children. So I have 6 kids, and you see this on a daily basis. Like, we'll do this thing, like we'll drop everything. We'll take them to the park, give them a wonderful day, get ice cream on the way home. You get home, you're like, hey, I should be parent of the year right now, right? I did all this stuff for my kids. What do? Mom, I want this, this, this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just gave you everything, and now you want more. And the truth is, we're all that way, right? Like with kids, they don't hide it, but we as adults hide it. And so whether it's King Henry going on the Crusades, whether it's Stalin trying to design his political utopian in Russia, or whatever, people get carried away. They do stupid, malicious things. They take an ideal, they rally the ideal to be an absolute, and no ideal should ever be an absolute. Only God can be an absolute. And they take that ideal and they slaughter under the name of the ideal. And it's horrible. It's terrible. It does fly exactly in the face of what they're claiming to be, but that's the reality. But if I look forward and I say, what is there then of faith for us now? And here's kind of my claim to you is, and this is my perspective as a man of faith, the more deeply I engage the truth, the more fruit I see in that engagement. All right? Let me give an example here to this, right? So we homeschool our children, and children need a certain amount of structure, a certain amount of exposure to content. We require math and reading. We have some more flexibility about other subjects. We let them choose some of their own subjects, but they have to choose some sort of subjects, right? As you go through this, I can either be like, kids should just have to deal with themselves. Kids, educate yourself. You're on your own. Or I can deal with the truth that there are some needs they have, some external structural needs, and I can embrace that. And the training of the kids will be better the more the truth I embrace. And so I would claim that in a very real way, I expect you and I both, if we point up and we say there's a higher power up there that we both call God, we'd find agreement. And my invitation to you would be, that's an awesome start. But can you go deeper? Is there more truth to be found? And if so, would finding that truth bring more fruit yet? Because I think it's a great start right there. Honestly, it's from a psychological perspective. Even having a relative orientation to an external higher power brings tremendous powerful good into our lives as humans. But it doesn't end there. There's more good possible. My invitation would be, can we together talk about it in a calm, exploring way, kind of right now? Be like, here's what I think. Here's how I look at it. What do you think?
Yeah, that's where it gets hard. You have these political debates, religion debates, and people get so emotional and triggered, and just, it's like an endless cycle where like nothing gets solved.
I don't think we actually have debates anymore. In a debate, you have to listen to the other side.
Anymore? Oh, yeah, we don't even listen anyway.
Who listens anymore? I mean, for heaven's sakes, who listens to a five-word long Twitter comment of hate? No one wants to listen to that. They just fire back. If we're going to debate something, I have to hear what you say. I have to ponder it. I have to glean it for useful and goodness. Like, what in here will grow my life? And then I'll offer you something. And I'll invite you to do the same, to ponder it and say, what little smidgen of what that crazy stuff Michael said might actually have goodness to it. Where does that happen anywhere in a political system anymore? I mean, it's heaven forbid what's going to happen if we actually have presidential debates this cycle. I don't think that they'll even hear one actual word that they'll interpret from the other person. When you read about the Lincoln-Douglas debates, right, they actually listened. And they said, yeah, I hear where they're going from. Here's something good, but here's where I differ. And here's the bit why I differ. We're mostly the same. We have the same end goals. But here's a little bit I differ, and here's why I differ. And there's thoughtfulness there. There's engaging. There's listening. Listening is a lost art. Social media strongly discourages listening. It strongly encourages attention hopping. Listening's hard. You have to take everything else, the trillions of distractions the world offers, set them to the side, and focus on just one comparatively slow data stream and process it.
Yeah, that's what I've been like trying to make more content around, is basically like we live in this like glorious time of technology and exponential growth and like AI and so many resources at our hand, and yet we're still stuck. Like we still feel like we can't do anything. We are just going through the motions of life. So what does your role play in that? Because I know you're a life coach. And do you only coach men, or do you coach a woman as well?
So let me answer the last question first. I only coach men. And there's a very real reason why. Men and women's brains work differently. I will stand up and shout that as how loud as it needs to be shouted. They are measurably, scientifically, in multiple dimensions, in multiple capacities, very, very, very different. And there is something fundamental about a man engaging a man and a woman engaging a woman that is fundamentally different than a man engaging a woman. Can a man coach a woman? Absolutely. But I believe the right response for coaching in almost every situation is with someone of the same gender, because they can challenge you in a different way. But going back a step, let me tell you a story. I love the story. So when Mother Teresa first arrives in America, she gets off the plane, right? She looks around, and her first comment is, wow, I have never been to such an impoverished country. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, this is America. Like, we're the richest country in the world. What do you mean? And in her cute little Mother Teresa way, she says, oh, no. I can't do the accent right. Emotionally impoverished. And that has stuck with me. Henry David Thoreau wrote, we are men living lives of quiet desperation. And I think that phrase, quiet desperation, is the catchphrase for our world. We have money, we have technology, we have AI. We don't have what the human being needs. The human being is not made to live off of money. Even though living off of food, there's only so much that we need. What we need is relationships. What we need is dynamics. We need connections. Real relationships are the antithesis of social media. You may have 50,000 Facebook friends and not a single person you can talk to when you're feeling down. And those relationships are the currency, the sustenance of the soul, of the heart, of the emotion. And we, at our great peril, pretend that somehow our technology, our AI, can have any real substitute for someone who, when you're sad, can hold your hand and give you a hug, that when you're feeling down, can challenge you. Hey, look, you have more power here than you think. You can change your life. You are able to make things better. It's going to be hard, but it's only slightly less hard than if you don't do anything at all. So do something about it. Take action. And that may be discouraging at first, but when you really think it through, when you have someone there with you in a relationship who's willing to walk beside you, it transforms the experience. And so to me, that's what coaching is. But let me give you one more bigger perspective on this. So it used to be that the virtual known first world was Christian, right? And so there's a common framework of here's values, here's morals, here's how we see the world. Well, we've, as a culture, largely left that behind. It's just left a gap. And here, my claim to you is the role that the faith used to play in emotional and social regulation has been taken over by therapists. And you see this as therapy use has shot through the roof. And simultaneously, there are ideas that have swept into the therapeutical school that say, oh, just listen, confirm what they say, it's okay. The client leads the discussion, and that's good. And to an extent, fair enough. However, with the loss of the higher external reference, the natural proclivity of a human being when a self-leading discussion is towards narcissism. And it may not be overt, outright narcissism, but internal narcissistic tendencies is, what is it I want? What do I want to do? Well, my authority structure, the therapist, confirms that. Great. I'm good to go. I should do what I think is right. And the truth is we're all selfish. We're all, malicious at times. I'm a complete and total a-hole at times. My wife will back that up for sure. And it's not right that I just simply look internally. I need this external reference. And so this is where I come with coaching, is I look at coaching as something fundamentally different than therapy. And let me actually maybe give a little more buttressing to the therapeutic enterprise. When an individual goes through an event that is genuinely so traumatic that he is unable to process the memory of that event on his own. I mentioned sexual stuff that occurred when I was a child. What happens oftentimes in those situations is your brain, when it says, if you were to say, think back on that moment and describe to me what that moment occurred, it recoils in horror. It's unable to go into that memory because the pain is too severe. And if I speak from a scientific perspective for a second, it's as if the self-reductive potential of the brain, the ability to process things, is so broken because of this event that a good therapist will loan his fully functional nervous system to the client to process that event for him slowly. And the proper nervous system, the functioning nervous system of the therapist says, okay, so this was the first thing. Your dad raised his hand. I bet your brain thought it meant this. I bet you probably were feeling scared. I bet you're probably feeling this way. And then he had hand turned into a fist. And then you probably had this feeling. And this probably happened. And he goes through that. And in that capacity, therapy is essential. That is not coaching. I have encountered clients before who, when we'll hit this issue, they have that reverse reaction. I'll say, whoa, we need to pause right now. This just became an issue of therapy. Because coaching is fundamentally different. As a coach, think of your soccer coach. Does the coach hit the ball for you in soccer? No. The coach stands to the side and says, hold your leg this way, swing this way, spin your body this way. You've got your weight on the wrong foot. Your arms are doing the wrong thing. I'm actually, ironically, I'm a soccer coach, but not that good of a soccer coach. Anyways, I'm a much better life coach than soccer coach, put it that way. And the coach stands there, and he's simultaneously the biggest encourager, but he's also teaching you to use your own nervous system, to process your own life, to set aside the things that don't matter. We all get these hang-ups. Like we get hung up on this, that, or the other thing. Oh, well, I didn't get this particular promotion at work. My life's over. What am I going to do with myself? Dude, put your resume together, file application somewhere else. Like sometimes you just need a kick in the butt to do what we know we need to do, but we're so stuck on something. And so in this absence, in this post-Christendom world, where the absence of the larger power is gone, and that affects even those who are Christian, because that is the bread and water we eat and consume in society. That's the air we breathe. That's the cultural values that are inculcated into us subconsciously, right? In that system, I see the explosion of coaching as a natural successor to the explosion of therapy. And bluntly, while therapy does have an extremely valid role, many therapists vastly overstep that role. And now we're seeing this sort of trend towards more and more people saying, I don't trust therapists. I don't like therapists. And fair enough, because the therapist went too far. They have a great spot.
Yeah, I like how you're bringing up therapy, because therapy is it's helped me personally get through like breakups and stuff. And I think there's pros and cons to therapy. Let's just say that. Like
I've
it's
had years of therapy, man.
like,
I wouldn't be who I am without it. I'm not trying to speak wholly of negative therapy.
yeah, I just think therapy, you can't go to therapy for faith, because you don't like, therapy doesn't teach you faith. Like I think
Yeah.
therapy teaches you self-awareness. I think it teaches you how to process your emotions. And one thing I would disagree with though is that
Yeah.
sometimes it focuses on the problem and not like getting past the problem sometimes.
I totally understand. I've been a dog owner most of my life. It's all good. I think you're right. And I don't want to paint too broad of a negative brush about therapists. There's a lot of them out there that do tremendous good work, have hearts of gold, and have saved a lot of emotional lives, for sure. But we need something more. It can't just be therapy.
So what are some of the common challenges and issues that men seek you out for?
You know, I'd say well, first off, let's hit the nail on the head. We live in a world where pornography addiction is rampant, and the number of men and surprisingly growing number of women who are addicted to pornography is almost incalculable. This is true across borders of faith. This is true across borders of any politics. Like, it doesn't matter. This problem persists everywhere. It fires some of our most fundamental dopamine pathways in a way that is more addictive than cocaine. Like, I've talked to men who have been addicted to both, and they're like, it was way easier to break free from cocaine. And I believe them. Like, look at the primacy of these pathways through your brain. And so that's a big problem. The sex drive didn't fare well going through the 60s. A lot of this, free love, expansion kind of stuff turns out not to make people happy. And it makes pleasure, sure, but it doesn't make happiness. I heard once a great distinction between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure is the sensation you feel while the good thing's occurring. So let's say you and I go out to eat ice cream. I love ice cream, right? Yeah, I'm experiencing pleasure while I eat that ice cream. I love ice cream. Like a good chocolate with some like chocolate clumps in there. Oh, like a Tillamook mudslide. Ooh, man, I'm getting excited. All right.
I don't have a sweet tooth. I get cravings. Like, I do get cravings for sweets. Like, my ex built this bad habit in me where it's like after every dinner or meal I have to have like a sweet to balance it out. It's like I never used to do that before that.
I have no idea what you're talking about officially. I have no idea at all, of course. Anyways, that's pleasure. Happiness is how you feel after the event. So I go to the gym. Honestly, I do CrossFit. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. You don't always feel pleasure when you're doing CrossFit. You're in the middle of the 59th rep of some horrible motion, and you're like, this sucks. But afterwards, you walk out of the gym, you feel happiness because there's a goodness there. In a society, we've substituted happiness. We've taken that away and substituted in pleasure. And you see this rampant across the sexual domain, most prominently in pornography, but in a lot of other ways. That's a huge part. That's a huge cause of men I work with. The next biggest one, by far, is men don't know how to be strong men. Look, here's the reality. Men are designed to be strong, okay? Like, you can look at this from a biological perspective. Men have something 30 to 50% more upper body strength than women. Like, it's just biology. It's baked into your DNA as a man. That's how your body works. As a general, you have more lower leg strength as well, but it's not a guarantee. And we're talking statistical distributions here, of course, right? Where obviously it could be an individual female bodybuilder who could totally outperform a scrawny young male. But as a statistical distribution, men are supposed to be stronger. But physical strength is not the only way they're supposed to be stronger. And now we're going to stuff that may make people grumpy, but that's okay. I can handle grumpiness. My claim to you is men have to be emotionally more solid than women as well. And I'll appeal this just briefly to the ancients. There's the idea of the masculine and feminine, right? And historically, masculine is associated with order and feminine is associated with chaos. Jordan Peterson caught a ton of flack when he first brought this idea out, but I'm going to back him to the hilt on this one. Chaos isn't bad. Everything good you need in life is found in chaos. Everything new, life-giving, novel, that springs forth of goodness comes from chaos. You just need the order so the chaos doesn't kill you. And so it's a balance, the two, right? Neither one is good, neither one's bad. Both are necessary. But understand that in this dichotomy, the masculine is of order. And if a man doesn't know how to be strong and ordered, and he goes and gets married, Here's what happens. Well, he's not being strong in order in his marriage. His wife gets scared, and so she's not free to go into her feminine. So she's like, well, shoot, if he's not going to step up into the order, I guess I got to do with the order, right? Well, all of a sudden now she's living out a masculine role. Men and women can both live out both roles. She's living out the masculine role, and he's sitting there like, what do I do? She's masculine. I don't know how to be feminine. Ah, crap, this sucks. And they get stuck. And they get stuck in this stalemate. The stalemate leads to marital dryness. It leads to coldness. It eventually, in its extreme form, leads to affairs. It leads to all these turning outs and unfulfillment of the marriage. And this problem is even more rampant than pornography. And you see this with men who do not know how to be strong. They were never taught. But look at our society. Anywhere in society is genuine male strength praised? Anywhere. Oh, that's patriarchal suppression. That's abuse. Here's Homer Simpson. Be him. Like, I grew up in the age where Simpsons were really popular. And so for me, Homer Simpson will be the archetype role model.
I have to say, but I grew up watching Simpsons every Sunday. And there's not controversies, there's conspiracies behind that, like how they predict.
So many things.
Like, how do they predict? And it's like social programming or something. I don't know, man.
My favorite is the Trump for president prediction. That one, I don't know how they could have seen that one. That was so brilliant.
Social programming. Somebody, I didn't really argue with somebody, but sometimes I just like to comment on trolley post. And somebody posted, what was it? It was like about gender roles. And I said, honestly, yes, it's like a societal, like, upbringing thing that we have, gender roles, like women should do this, men should do this. I think it just comes down to biology. Like, men are naturally more capable of certain things, and women are naturally more capable of certain things. And that's where we like get confused on like what gender roles are. But yeah, that's just my take on it. I think men are naturally better at certain things when it comes to living, and women the same. They have certain things that are better. And that's like gender roles, I guess, to me.
You know, there's beautiful but lengthy writing by now St. John Paul the Great called The Theology of the Body. He goes through and talks about how our very bodies, just the body of a human male and the body of a human female, not any particular body, you don't need to vision my body, that's not going to do anyone any good, they encode basics of what we're designed to do. So look at a woman. Everything about a woman is inward focus. It's inward drawing. And you see this maternity, motherhood at its finest. Little child has a boo-boo, runs to mama. Mama just gathers and pulls the child in, comforts him. Women are intrinsically pulling in. They're inward focused. One of the gifts of femininity is this nurturing potential, this inward focus. Men, by contrast, everything about us, even our genitalia, is outward pointing. And so you see the same child goes to dad to be challenged, to be pushed. Here's the goal, son. Strive for the goal. Here's the objective. I'm going to push you a little bit. Kick that ball harder. Hit that ball with that baseball bat harder. Run hard. This push for the goal. Because men have this outward drive. And that's natural. That's how we see things. In fact, that's actually what attracts women to us. The most attractive thing a woman can see in a man is this drive, this energy, this fiery passion of this outward focus. I'm going to conquer the world. I'm going to do it. You see this is very, very attractive to women. Don't actually conquer the world. That's like Genghis Khan style. Like, that's probably a little too far, but.
Well, I have another analogy that I'd like to share about gender roles. We're animals. We obviously are like the most smartest, I guess, intellectual animals. But gender roles exist in the natural world as well. And the analogy, or I always get confused by an analogy or metaphor. But look at bears. Look at bears when it comes to mating season. They have duels where they literally will like go on top of a hill or like some epic battle, and the two alpha bears will just duel it out, and whoever wins gets the female bear. That's the natural order of gender roles in the natural world. You don't see the female bears going out there having duels for the men, do you? Like, so they do exist. We're innately born with certain things, and it just gets skewed when we say like, oh, women can't do this or men can't. I mean, you can do whatever you want, and it's not necessarily expected of you. It's just we're naturally better at certain things.
You can do a lot of things. You can use a screwdriver as a hammer. Like, you can do it. I've been desperate before I had to pound a nail with a screwdriver. It tends not to make you happy. You tend to, all of a sudden, that one time you miss and you hit the nail in the palm of your thumb or palm of your fist instead. You're like, oh! Like, you can do it. That doesn't mean it's the way God designed to do it. It doesn't mean it's the way it works best. It doesn't mean it's going to make you happy. But kind of going back to what you asked the question at the start of this whole conversation is, what do I work with men for? Figuring out what that role is. Because they don't know. How could they? And it's complicated.
What about being vulnerable as a man? Because that's like our feminine side that we have to balance, right? Like that vulnerability. But I see it as a strength to embrace. I think if we embrace our vulnerability, we can process emotions and just show up as a better person.
In many of the ancient warlike clans and cultures, it would be all men that would go to war, and they would fight for the day. And at the end of the day, when the battle was over, they would then mourn and sob together. And it was a big emotional release. And you'd see the same group of men, like imagine like these Viking level fit men that were just like could rip you and me from arm to leg right now that I'm trying, right? These manly men. Afterwards would sob, hugging their fellow brethren in mourning of the friends they had lost. And there's something symbolic there, that there is a tremendous strength in being able to share, to be vulnerable with another. But I have to put an asterisk there because there's different types of vulnerability. And there are many asymmetries in marriage. But one of them is that it is possible for a woman to share about any topic with her husband in a way that's constructive. She still needs to be respectful if she wants to really be constructive, but almost any topic is kosher. But the reverse is not true for men. And here's why. There are times when men can be vulnerable in a way that maintains the masculine role. Honey, I had a rough day at work today. I'm really worried my boss may not be able to do this thing. Then this other person said this to me that kind of hurt. I'm feeling kind of put down by that. I really feel, my parents are dying, and I feel so sad that my parents are dying. I haven't spent enough time with them. There's ways we can share that are proper with maintaining ourselves in a masculine order world. But there's other times when, like after the battlefield, those men weren't sharing those feelings with women. They were sharing them with other men. And I said earlier, there's a difference between the men-to-men interaction and woman-to-woman interaction. This is one example of which. A man can go to another man. He can share anything. He can share, my life's a piece of bleepity bleep, and I think I'm completely losing it. I have no idea what to do for any of this. I'm scared out of my mind, and I have no clue. Say that to another man, and he can be there for you. Say that to your wife, and she's going to get scared, and she's going to start shifting to that masculine position. And that's not proper. That's not helpful. It's not going to lead you to happiness. It's not going to lead you to intimacy. There are some topics that as a man, you only get to dump on another man. And it sounds a little harsh the way I'm saying this. I'm a big fan of camping. And so a lot of times men share around a campfire with an adult beverage or two. And after all the kids are tucked away and fallen asleep, with a quiet voice, me and another man might sit there at a campfire and say, so how's your marriage doing? Well, I really feel like I'm failing my wife this way. I'm coming up short here. I'm struggling in this particular bit. So yeah, I understand that. I am too. And so we have to understand as a male, the vulnerability, we have to do the time. I tell my kids all the time, timing is just as important as content. When, where, with whom is just as important as what. And I think there's so much attention paid to what do we say that we don't pay enough attention to when, where, and with whom do we say it.
I agree, man. So how do you guide these men? Like, what are like the first steps, I guess, and yeah.
Most human beings are exceptionally good at deceiving ourselves. We are really, really good at pulling the wool over our own eyes. And the first step is almost always to get a clear picture what's actually happening. So often, I'll share I'm going to change the details of this, but a story that it was one of my clients just shared with me. The client had an hour-long fight with his wife, and it was a vicious one. Like one of those ones where, like, at the end of the fight, like, she's like, "I'm sleeping on the couch tonight." Like, it was nasty, and he felt horrible. I asked him, "What'd you fight about?" He said, "Oh, well, she said this and this and this and this." I say, "No, that's not what you fought about. Why do those make you angry?" And we started digging. He said, "Well, it made me angry. She thinks this." I'm like, "Well, you don't know what she thinks. Why did it really make you angry?" And what we dug down to, in his particular case, and I have to go a little more vague here, but all men have two primal fears. And these fears live in every single man. And every time these fears get poked, we get upset and oftentimes aggressive. And these two fears are the fear of being unworthy, sometimes phrased not good enough, and the fear of being intrinsically unlovable. And those are different things. The first one says, I'm able to be loved, but my execution is so crappy that I can't actually get it together enough. The second one says, I'm so blanked up that you can't love me even if I do the best. And high achievers tend to think the second one, low achievers tend to think the first one. But all of us tend to think both at some point. And so we narrowed it down. In his particular case, he got poked really hard by one of those fears. And that realization, when he had it, he said, it's not about the topic she said at all. He said, I really, really was scared in that moment. I'm just going to pick one randomly, that I really was unlovable. And here's the way in which I was unlovable. And he said, okay, you've learned something here about yourself. And now that you see that, that knowledge, that sight gives you the ability that the next time this comes up, as a man, you can say to yourself, she's saying these loud words, these horrible accusations, blah, 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 word, word, word. But what's happening in me is I'm afraid I'm unlovable right now. And that knowledge, that realization softens a man. And it creates a strength in him because he knows this is who I am, this is where I stand. And even the knowledge makes one stronger. But then we go from there and we say, okay, so this is your fear. And this is where the faith comes in. And then we need to place this fear in the context to the higher power. We need to place this fear in the context to God's vision for your life. And I have coached many people before from a secular perspective, and by all means, you can work with any higher power or any sort of external reference frame you need, or even an internal one potentially. I think it's faster when you have a faith. But it's the same process, which is identifying, finding that truthful nugget, surrendering that to the external power, and accepting what I can do and where my actual power lies. And my claim to this man at the end of this conversation was, the next time your wife comes to you with these words, my challenge to you is to let her say any word she says. And if you just stay calm, and just to know that she's just saying words, and for you to say to her and try to hear through those words and say something like, it sounds like you're really scared about something here. Help me understand what you're actually scared about. It sounds like you're really upset about something. To engage on that deeper level and to not let those words trigger your weaknesses. Because that's the trigger there is, and here's my challenge to you as well. What if every single time you get triggered, it's 100% about you? It's not about her. Because my wife walked in right now and said, Michael, stop robbing banks. I'd be like, okay, sure. I don't rob banks, so I don't care about that, right? But she walked in and said, be gentler to the kids. I'd be like, oh, wait a second, what do you mean? I'm getting triggered because it's something about me. And this sort of introspection creates tremendous strength in a man when he confronts these inner demons and goes through the work to counter some of these inner thoughts, and then shows up in a radically different way in his life.
Man, I couldn't agree more. I always challenge myself. And it's hard though in the moment, right? It's like, because once you're triggered, it's like a explosion of emotions,
Hormones.
Whatever you're feeling that you feel like you just want to release. It's like anger therapy. You just want to punch a bag or something, or work out or whatever. I think the first step in that helps me is just being very self-aware and being aware. Once you step into awareness and you start noticing how you feel in these moments, then you have to either do something physical, like take a deep breath or go for a walk or clear your head, and then come back from a calmer place. And I agree that every time you get triggered, it's not about what they said necessarily. It's about how you felt about what they said. And yeah, and then when you do that, you just show up as a better person and a more level-headed person.
It was
But then you
crazy.
can go in cycles though, because like, what if like you say that, like, what if you're like, oh, like it sounds like you're sad, and they're like, oh, you're being you're being sarcastic now, huh? Like, what do you like, and then what, like, what would you do then?
Well, let's just take that exact scenario. That's a great one. I would first challenge the
Yeah.
man. Was there any piece of you that was being sarcastic? Let's put it on the table here.
Mm,
Like, we humans, we're not
yeah.
mono feeling critters. Like, we can have this complex, simultaneously, a range of feelings. And here's the funny thing about other humans is they have a radar. And that radar is way more accurate than we would like to imagine that it is. Particularly women. Women have a very accurate radar as a general rule. Not always. And they will throw something out there. And if I'm brutally honest, even if I was 99% genuine, I bet there's 1% of me that was irritated by her. Like, it could be as little as, oh, I shouldn't have to deal with this right now. I have too many things I have to deal with this, right? And their radar picks up on it. And so, like, I would encourage that man in that moment to be brutally honest with himself. Was there a piece of you being sarcastic? If so, own it. Honey, I understand when you say that. I think you're right. There was a piece of me that's being sarcastic there. I'm sorry. I didn't want that. I wasn't intending that, but it was there. I'd like to try this again. I want to hear what you're feeling on a deeper level. And I'm imperfect. I may get in the way, but help me try to hear it on a better level, even if I'm not perfect. But to own it. You want to make the fight worse? Deny it. That's ridiculous. I never would. Yeah, watch where that goes.
Yeah, and then you just go in circles. Well, Mike, do you have anything else you'd like to share before we move on?
You know, I think that when we're talking about this kind of stuff, it's really common for men in particular to feel very, very alone with these problems. Women naturally share way more comfortably than men do. Like, you watch other women, they run up to the other, blah, 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 blah. The number of times I found out about sexual issues in my friend's marriage through our wives, I'm like, I don't need to know this. I don't know why you won't talk about this stuff. Like, that's just crazy to me, but they all do. They all talk about it. They share the stuff, right? And you're laughing, but we know it's true. And Lord love them, that's just how women process things. Whereas we men, we're like, I don't need directions. I know where to go. I can do it. And we end up feeling extremely alone. And my invitation to every man listening is, if you're in this spot and you feel alone, don't settle there, man. Find someone else to walk next to. It could be a buddy, it could be anyone. But like, if you've got friends and all you ever do is talk about the sports and the weather, find new friends. Hey, I love sports. Weather's a topic, sure. But you need something more than that in a deep friendship to have meaning. And if you need to go find that friendship and cultivate it, great, go do that. But you cannot do this alone. The human being wasn't designed to do it alone. Mother Teresa was spot on right when she said the emotional poverty of our country. We've got to have another man to walk beside, to share this with, to go through these problems with.
100%, man. That's why I'm glad we have people like you out there, man.
Well, I appreciate that.
Honestly. But I have the same ending I do on all my podcasts. First, we play this game, Where Should We Begin?
Okay, let's do it.
It's just one completely random question. You can skip the question if it's like too kinky or you don't want to talk about it. There are some kinky ones in here, but most of them are just like deep or like questions you could tell a little story about.
Yeah.
So the first one is, share something risky. Okay. Share something risky about when I look in the mirror, the first thing I see is. You have to combine them, like.
I see. Okay, so something risky is the first thing I see. You know, I think so I mentioned earlier to you offline, I'm 43 years old, and I just crossed my 40th decade the other day. And for the longest time I looked in the mirror, I saw a young man. And more recently I've looked in the mirror and I've seen a man who's not a young man. And, you know, there comes this point in life as a man where you realize I haven't accomplished what I wanted to accomplish yet. You know, and this is a really profoundly disturbing thought when it comes. Like when you're young, the world is your oyster. You could do it. You can be an astronaut, and you can be a professional NBA player, and you can do like all the stuff, right? Because you're young, the whole world's in front of you. As you get older,
like time is on your side.
Right, exactly. As you get older, more and more of those doors are closed, and you start to realize that all the doors are closing. You know, the ability to stay up late and then still get up in the morning and still be able to work and function that door's closed for me now. The ability to, I mentioned earlier that when I was in college, I drank like a fish. Well, there's a lot more consequences now if I drink alcohol as I'm getting older, and there's this sense of mortality, of timeline. Particularly, and I'm just going to throw the other as a father, I have 6 kids, and when I look in a mirror, the sense lately has been, what will be there for my grandkids? Like, am I balancing this well enough to leave enough for my grandchildren to know me? Because they're coming into this world that's bluntly crazy. Like, our world today is one of the harder worlds to live in of all time. Like, I get it. We have more comforts, but we have more emotional loneliness than ever. You look at these cool studies about where the happiest countries in the world are. And they're third world countries like Ethiopia, where they have just surrounded by friends and people who love them. And they have no cars. They walk everywhere. They walk an average of 13 miles a day. Average. Just think that through for a second. That's crazy pants. I might walk an average of 13 steps a day. It's not quite true. But like, it's nothing compared to the 13 miles. But they're so happy. And our children are growing up. And I can only imagine the world is not going to regress towards Ethiopia. And so what will I be able to give them? What will be of me there to be with them? And I think the mortality piece, well, buffered by the faith to a large extent, but still the mortality piece has been setting in on me lately. And I think when you say earlier about, you mentioned that you were glad for me to be here to give this to men. I do believe this is a calling that God has given me, at least for this phase of life, who knows for long, but it seems like it might stick. And it seems that evidence is building to make this be something, to be a light in the world for this. And I think it's easy as a man to drift, to be like, I gotta go take care of the lawnmower. Stupid lawnmower. This oil drain plan isn't working. And anyways, that's a separate story. Yeah, that was a real topic there. That one was there. See, talk about triggers right there. Got to do a real-time trigger in real right there. And to realize, don't be distracted by things of the world, that time is precious, that time is dear. Spend more time with the children. If nothing else, invite the boys along to go work on the lawnmower with you. Make that a connection. Make that an act of something bigger. And I think it's so easy, especially as an engineer who's efficiency-minded. I will do it. I will get it done efficiently. But to say the years coming up are I probably still have more in front of me than behind, but I'm probably going to get at least close to the middle point statistically. And to really just let that reality settle into me. And that's, I'm not a young man in the mirror anymore. I'm just not. I've obviously got the shine coming on real good here, but that's been true for a little while now. But I don't know if this makes sense or not, but lately when I've looked in the mirror, that's kind of the thing I've been seeing.
Yeah, I think the more grounded you are, the more in tune you get with that. And I love how you brought up like Ethiopia, because most of the world, I guess first world countries or countries with high GDP or whatever you want to call it, they live lives to earn a living. But you don't earn a living, you just live. And I think those countries that have the happiest rates or whatever, they just live and they're just surviving, and that's their focus. Their focus isn't trying to earn a living or reach a certain accomplishment. It's just living and loving each other and being there and surviving. And I think that's the deepest like part of humanity that we've lost touch with in the modern world.
Yeah. Do I have time for a quick story?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Okay. So this extremely successful German entrepreneur is traveling. He goes to Ireland, and he goes down near the water one day, and he sees this fisherman. It's 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning, and the fisherman's sitting on the beach, drinking his little Irish beer, and having the time of his life. And he looks over, there's the fisherman's boat, just filled with fish. And the entrepreneur, the German entrepreneur, says, "Whoa, you caught all those fish today?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I did." He says, "Well, what are you doing sitting here?" He's like, "Well, I caught my fish. I'm done for the day." And so, he's getting ready to sell the fish off, and as he's sitting there, and the German goes, "Well, don't you realize that if you kept fishing, you could make enough money to buy another boat, and then you could afford to hire more people and buy another boat eventually with 10 years of work and working really hard, you'd have bought a whole fleet of boats, And look at all the money. Then you can save all that money. You start getting ready to retire. And then 20 years down the road, after working really hard, you have all this money. You retire and you can do whatever you want. The fisherman goes, I do that right now. Why do I need to do that? And I think there's this lie that we bought that somehow like building this massive fortune is what's going to make us happy. But that Irish fisherman, he wants to fish a few hours and relax the rest of his day away. He's already living the dream life. When we've sacrificed so often what we really love, what our hearts yearn for this myth, for this lie that's always fleeting. It's always one more boat, one more person to hire, one more load of fish, and we'll finally be able to make it all. And as a culture, we've got to get back towards the simple stuff. No Ethiopian is sitting there saying, one more bushel of wheat and one more cart they can buy. Like let's live life. I'm going to hang out with grandma. I'm going to hang out with my cousins. We're going to run. You go there. If you ever visit there, you don't have to ask them to smile for pictures. It's hard to get them to stop smiling. Try to get American kids to smile for pictures. See what faces you get.
I mean, some people just, it's hard for them to smile. Like my daughter, they're 6. I have twin daughters. They're 6 years old, and it's like hard for her to smile. Like when you ask her to smile, she had this
Yep.
like it's like
My oldest the same way.
It's not like a natural smile. It's like a like a
my 13-year-old is saying we
like
call it
a
a scowl
forced
smile.
cringy smile. Like,
Yep.
yeah. And my other daughter, she's like photogenic, and just every time she smiles, it looks natural. But what would you tell like the naysayers? Like, oh, easy for you to say. Oh, like I still have to, because you have to be real too. It's like, man, like we really do have to, in America at least, we have to survive. You have to earn a living or make some sort of money to survive.
There's a lot of times in life we find ourselves in a spot we don't want to be, and fair enough. You're in that spot. You gotta do what you gotta do within reason. I don't want you to go selling kidneys on the internet, but you gotta do something to survive the moment. Okay, fair enough. But do you have a plan to get somewhere better? Do you have a plan to move somewhere, to change your life somehow, to meet someone new, to get a degree? What can you do long term? People tend to overestimate what they can do in 1 year and tend to underestimate what they can do in 5 years. And I think a lot of us Americans, we want instantaneous results. We said, I want it right now. I want it yesterday, for that matter, right? I want to buy a fruit tree from Costco and have it be a fully ballooned fruit tree that's ready to deliver fruit by the time I get home. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, the world of Amazon.
Exactly. And my response to these naysayers is, okay, if you're in a rough spot, you're in a rough spot. Let's make the best of where you are, but also let's make a real plan. Identify, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Break it down. What are the steps you have to do? And be serious about it. Like, I think it's easy to say the words. It's hard to do it. Like, to really do the soul searching work of what is it I really want. That is a hard thing to do. Like, I earlier joked around ice cream, and I could tell you, I want Tillamook mudslide ice cream. But do I? I'm already a little overweight. Do I really want more ice cream? I don't know, man. It's tough to say. It's tough for me to really say. Is it worth the extra calories? Is it worth the problems I have with sugar at this point in my life to eat the extra ice cream? I'm not so sure it is anymore. And so to really do that digging is and ice cream is a silly thing, right? Well, first off, no one ever says ice cream's silly. Ice cream's serious business. But on the grand level thing, right? Ice cream is a silly thing compared to understanding the depth of the human heart and what we're craving and what we want and need in relationship and fulfillment. What can you do to make a real shift in that?
Yeah, I think you have to start asking yourself, what do you really want? And then once you find that answer and start working towards it, don't be so attached to the outcome, and just keep putting in the work. Yeah. Sorry, my dog is like crying in the background.
Yeah, I was wondering what that. Oh, dogs.
Yeah, she's like whining. But I'd like to ask you my final questions.
Yeah.
And the first question is, what is your biggest regret?
If I'm really honest, I think my biggest regret was how long I fought doing it my way. I mentioned I graduated high school in 99, and I didn't convert until 08. And so I had almost 10 years there of really where I wasn't tied down by anything, and I just was a stubborn a-hole who wanted to go off and give the middle finger to the world. And if I could time travel back and say something to myself, probably at the right time would have been somewhere around the beginning of high school, and just be like, Michael, here's some big picture stuff you got to know, some things you can do different in your life. Like, even if someone had just introduced me to weightlifting back then, that alone would have had a profound impact on my life, let alone introduce me to the concept of forgiveness and why I need to forgive, not for their sake, but for my own. I was an angry, bitter young man, and I did so much damage to myself. I mean, forget all the other people I did damage to along the way, but so much damage along the way. And what a waste. What a waste.
Who or what has made the biggest impact in your life so far?
Boy, it's hard to pick. But I'm going to pick Ben, because this is just such a great story. So I mentioned that after I converted the faith, I thought my problems were solved. Then I got married about a year later, 2 years later. Then we had our first child 9 months after that. And about a year after that, I'm in church in the cry room with this 1-year-old screaming her head off. And I'm just livid. Like, I'm not hurting her, but I'm squeezing her too hard. Like, you can just tell, like, I'm just dripping with anger. All right. And so I didn't know at the time, but a man was watching me behind me. And next Sunday, I'm walking out the church, and this man was brilliant. He pre-planned this with both of our wives. So my wife knew what was going on, but I didn't know what was going on here. And so, like, this is a really smart move, by the way. So he walks up to me as I'm walking out the building. He says, "Hi, my name is Ben." He's like, "Hi, Ben. My name is Michael. I guess it's nice to meet you." He kind of pulls me a little bit off to the side, a little bit, not forcefully, but, insistingly a little bit. And he says, "I don't want you to be scared by this, but I want to share something with you." I said, "All right, sure, go for it." I mean, clearly I'm not committed, really, at this point. He pulls out a flash drive. He says, "A few years ago, I was in a really bad spot, and I was really struggling. And another man reached out to me, and he offered to talk to me about what's going on, and he gave me some help. He hands me this flash drive. He says, on this flash drive, first off, all you copyright people, don't get too upset about this. But on the flash drive, he says, a whole bunch of audiobooks and recorded talks. And he said, these are the things that really changed my life. Listen to this content." He said, "You know what? I'm not going to pressure you. If you walk out this door and flip that flash drive in the trash, you don't ever have to talk to me again. But if you don't want something else," he hands me his card. He says, "Here's my card. At any point in time, listen to the stuff in the flash drive. If you have questions, give me a call. We'll do lunch. I'm buying." And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't know what to make of this, right? And I was shocked. First off, like, it's not common another person's this bold to do this sort of a move. And Ben was good as gold. He really was. And so I walk out of the church that day with this flash drive and his business card. And my wife knew what was going on, right? I mentioned the whole cahoots thing. And I'm like, I don't know. That was really weird. That guy seems weird. Don't you think he's weird? And she was like, I don't know. Well, what's on the flash drive? Are you curious? Like, this brilliancy on her moment there. Like, never tell your husband what to do. But if you engage his curiosity, like, oh, man, set the hook real good there. That barb went in. And so then I was hooked. And so I started listening. First, talk on the flash drive. Do you want to guess what the topic was? Anger, of course. And, as we're going through this, it was very quickly clear that, listen, the content was amazing, but I needed more. And so I called Ben up, and he said, yeah, let's meet for lunch. We met for lunch once a month. And I would just talk to him. Just questions. Here's what's going on. He had 7 kids at the point, big family. He was a 15, 20 years older than me. Really, really solid man, solid faith, solid world perspective. And Ben changed my life by being bold. Like, he went up out of nowhere to somebody he had no idea who he was, and he took that risk. And that's one of the reasons why I do these podcasts now, is I hope that maybe just a little bit there's some other Michael listening that I get to be Ben for, where they can hear something I'm saying and get curious and go check it out and learn more, because I wish I had had a Ben 10 years earlier in my life, but praise the Lord, he came when he did.
Yeah, that's like the power of just mentorship and guidance, right? The next question is, what is one lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
Only one, huh? Let's go with I'll say what I think one of the most painful one was. It's not about me. So I don't know about you, but I like to make things be about me. When something doesn't go the way I want, it's clearly a meant as a personal insult to me. When if my wife gets mad at me, it's all about me. And when the kids get upset, it's all about me. And this lesson, this idea of learning to say it's not about me, means that when my wife gets upset, I can hold my calm. I used to get so mad. I would yell. We would both get these mutual screaming matches that would just curl the paint off the walls. And it was so sad that we would do this. And on my part of it, it's because I thought it was all about me. And as I get older, and I realize that she's allowed to have her own feelings. She's allowed to have her own perspectives. And they can be different than mine. And that's okay, because it's not actually about me. It's actually just about her. That when I'm working with someone, and if they don't like my work, it doesn't have to mean it's about me. It could mean they just have different preferences. They just have different styles. I don't have to take it personally. And I mentioned earlier the challenge that every single time you get triggered, assume it's your problem, not about the other person. It's the same sort of concept, where if they're doing something and they're getting triggered, it's not about me. It's just about them. And to give them space for it to be about them, to give my wife space to have her own feelings. And those feelings may not be comfortable for me, but it's not about me. And it allows me to show up in such a different way. And I wish I could count on 10 hands how many times I had to get beaten over the head by this concept before I started to give into it.
That's something I tell myself whenever I have to like do like a public speaking or something, or anything I'm afraid of. I'm like, okay, this is nerve-wracking. I'm gonna speak in front of however many people, and what helped me with that is that exact mindset, is that it's not like about me necessarily, like the attention is on me, but it's not about me. It's about the information I'm providing to the audience. And
Funny,
yeah,
if I dovetail one
different
quick, very short
context,
story. Yeah.
yeah.
I've done a fair bit of public speaking, and that is its own scariness. I discovered a whole new level of that with just public singing. And so I cantor at the church service, which means sometimes you go up front. It's just you by yourself in front of the microphone, in front of the whole congregation singing. And so a whole step up. Like, I've talked a lot, but having to sing a note on it, oh man. That's
Especially if you have like a cracky voice or something. I'm just kidding. But my next question is, what would you do or experience in life if time and money was not an issue?
Oh, I really think I'd love to take, so I have 6 kids. The current age range at time recording is age 4 to age 13. And I would love to go live in different cultures throughout the world for like 2 or 3 months at a time. Like, my kids, I love them dearly, and I'm doing the best I can, but they are so spoiled in so many ways. They're so entitled, and they just get so upset if they don't get XYZ thing that's just ridiculous. I would love to go somewhere and spend 3 months in Ethiopia. All right, kids, we're going to live this way for 3 months. I'd love to go spend 3 months in South America somewhere. I'd love to spend 3 months in Italy. Just get a different feel for that pace of life. I'd love to spend 3 months in Ireland, maybe even during the winter, somewhere like kind of dark, and let them feel that one. This sounds a little crazy. I'd love to take them into Russia for 3 months if I keep them safe, and be like, see, here's a different culture entirely. Feel the Eastern culture. Feel the vibe of this. Just a few months to do that, because there's this sense of isolation. We're more connected than ever by the internet, but on an emotional level, we're so isolated. I would like them to feel the different stages of life out there. So when they come back to America, they will have such a better appreciation for what we do have, and the ability to reject the garbage that's here, because there's plenty of garbage here too.
I love that, man. I have the same like vision. And I've thought about that myself as well. Like, if I ever had to, like, if I had infinite time and money as well to just teach my daughters and family, that's like the best world history class you can get right there.
It is so fulfilling. We spoke earlier about finding a purpose and chasing it. Like, pouring yourself into your children it's up there, man. It's up there.
My final question is not really a question, but is there any last thing you'd like to share with the audience that would resonate?
I think the last thing I'd maybe like to wrap it up with, we've covered a lot of topics here, and we've talked about a lot of the major problems going on in the world, a lot of the struggles, and I think what I want to end with is on as messages of hope. And the average human being, while it is true that we're malicious and selfish and all the yucky stuff, there's also tremendous good. There's tremendous potential, and there's tremendous reason for hope in every single human being. And every single human being, no matter how much we might like to play the victim card, I can't do this because he, she, it, whatever, did that other thing, I'm unable to hear. The truth is, we are way more powerful to be able to make real change in the positive parts of the world. And we waste that potential daily, but that doesn't mean it's not real. That doesn't mean it's not there. I want to invite every human being, man and woman, to do a critical look inwards and say, where am I allowing myself to play the victim? there's a whole branch in psychology that talks about what's called the victim triangle, and we can hop from different points in this, to being the victim, the hero, or the villain, as we hop around the triangle, and they're all just as much of a trap, because all of them distract us from what we ourselves are capable of bringing about the good in the world. It gets our focus onto something else as to why we can or cannot do something. And the potential of every human being, male and female, to bring good is far greater than we know. And I want to make one slightly further call out to men in particular. I believe that men in particular right now are more disconnected than ever from the source of their strength, from the source of their ability to bring positive change into the world. They doubt themselves. They don't have good role models. They don't see it. They oftentimes don't even believe it's there, but it is there, and you can get there. Do the work. Be bold and take the risk.
Distraction is a hell of a drug.
Isn't it though?
Michael Jekith, everybody. Where can people go check you out?
So I'm very simple. I'm an engineer, right? We mentioned this already. I have no marketing skills in my body. So I'm a Catholic. I'm a life coach. I work with men. I put those words together because I didn't know what else to do with them. I called it Catholic Life Coach for Men. You type that in with, put the word podcast over it, you're going to find my podcast. You just leave the word podcast off, you're going to find my website. So it's just that simple. Catholic Life Coach for Men.
Go check them out, everybody. And as always, stay curious. Keep going. You got this. Peace.
Amen, brother.